Alright, I'm just finishing page 78. This will happen either because of smaller markets or because of skewed age distribution, or from an indistinguished workforce, or less spirit, or from an aging society, or from a combination of all of the above. The extent of the economic harm is hard to gauge. For example, you can play out the coffee maker game at the German TFR of 1.27 and get one set of answers, play it out at the US 1.8 TFR and get another, try shrinking that to 1.6, or go on up over time to a 2.1 replacement rate and get still other sets of assumptions. What will the effect be? Perhaps simply lower economic growth, say from 3% per year to 2%, or from 2% to 1% or to 0%. Manageable, but less than we deserve. Or perhaps an ongoing birth dearth may cause a much greater turbulence that may not even be measurable in standard economic numbers, as will be explored in the next chapter. All that we already know is that we will be living in a very different economic circumstance. Okay, Chapter 7, the demography of geopolitics and geoculture. So then, this much we know. There is a birth dearth in our Western world. Birth rates have been well below replacement for almost a generation in some places. There is no sign yet of reversal. Many demographers believe rates are still headed down. There is a moderate growth in the nations of the Soviet bloc. There is and will be rapid population growth in the Third World. We know with some certainty that the birth dearth will create economic change and turbulence in the Western world. With less surety, it is posited here that such economic change will harm us. Question: Would the United States be a world power, the leader of the free world, if our current population were still 4 million people, as it was in 1790, or 62 million, as it was in 1890? We shall come to an answer: no. Let us continue our speculation. Consider a new strand in the argument about the birth dearth: geopolitics and geoculture. I confess that, to me, it may well be the most important aspect of the birth dearth situation. Much of what follows stems from an essay on this topic, a speculation on the geopolitical implications of below replacement fertility in the Western democracies by Ben Wattenberg, Senior Fellow and Carl Zinsmeister, Research Associate, American Enterprise Institute, delivered at the American Enterprise Institute Public Policy Seminar, December 1985. I wrote in collaboration with Carl Zinsmeister, my former colleague at the American Enterprise Institute. He should, however, not be held responsible for every word here. Moreover, the emphases are my own. I believe the geopolitical and geocultural situation will cause more long-range harm than the economic situation. I also believe it with more surety because both the data and the logic of the geopolitical case seem to me more powerful than the economic case. It is serious. Consider again the situation originally laid out in Chapter 4. Let us say that the modern era began with the end of World War II in 1945. The 42 years since have been a period of Western dominance. I would argue that it has been the most progressive epoch in human history. The Western nations themselves are the most prosperous, most technologically advanced, most productive, and most free collection of peoples ever assembled. For more than 4 decades in alliance, despite perpetual bickering, they have guaranteed a big power peace. The less developed world has also prospered. Often under Western sponsorship, there has been an explosion of independent nation-states, often modeled, at least in principle, on Western concepts. Although tragic poverty still exists, the Third World has benefited from Western medicine, science, and trade. Even the communist world has prospered from our advance. They have shared our life-enhancing technology. They have joined in the benefits of reducing big power violence. What has caused this remarkable movement? I believe the fruits of Western culture and ideals emanating from modern Western nations have shaped the progressive nature of the world at this time. The specific content of that culture, the precise nature of those ideals, are hard to define. But they clearly involve political freedom. They involve intellectual freedom. They just as surely involve technological innovation. They involve commercial interchange. The leader in this cause has been the U.S. It is no wonder that during this time American, or English if you insist, has become the world's dominant language. Is all this threatened? I fear so. Recall from an earlier chart, see page 47, that this international flowering began at a time when the West constituted almost 1/4 of the world's people. Today, about 1/7 of the world is Western. That may not be a critical difference. But look at the trend in 25-year bites, and remember that much of it is already pretty well locked into concrete by prior fertility patterns. Ooh. Fraction of total world population in Western community. 1950, 22%. 1985, 15%. 2010, 13%. 2035, I don't remember that year. 8%. Oh. 2060, 7%. 2085, 5%. What happens when the West is less than 10% of the world? Less than 5%. It seems to me unreal to say that nothing happens. Demography is the marathon social science. The rise and fall of nations and civilizations is the tale of long-distance runners. Relative positions are perceived to change slowly, but they do change inexorably. Recall that it was less than 50 years ago that the world's leading geopolitical power was Little England. What happens if Western economic markets become less relevant? What happens if Western nations get to the point where it is much more difficult or even impossible to project military power if and when necessary? Under such circumstances, will Western values remain strong and influential around the globe? Or will they wilt, barely noticeably from year to year, victim of an erosion in a political and cultural economy of scale? Will it turn out that, after several centuries of turbulent regnancy?
I think it's Regency. I'm sorry.
See, too many ends. Topped by a half or so century of making it work peacefully and progressively, we Westerners and we Americans will slowly begin to fall behind or drop out of the long-distance race. To answer, we must first ask an elementary question. Do mere numbers of people equate with power and influence, be it military, cultural, or economic? Consider first the military situation. Of course, it is quite possible that the modern nations and cultures can remain strong for a very long while, even in the face of the changing demographic balance that is in store for us. There are some examples in history of small populations that seem to have preserved their military and cultural influence among larger neighbors for quite a while. This could have come about through superior organization, technology, or just plain spirit. Okay? But it usually also involved some accretion of demographic power, usually by conquest. Whoa. with ensuing loyalty by the conquered to the conquerors. Oh my god.